I'm Eszter Párkányi. I'm a lawyer from Hungary and I work as a legal analyst at the Center for Fundamental Rights. It's a conservative think tank, a Christian-minded conservative right-wing think tank. Basically, we deal with legal analysis, but we also do look at politics, both in Hungary, in Europe, and in the USA. We haven't covered Uruguay yet, but we will see maybe in the future. Our view of the world is defined by our history in many ways and in our culture in many ways. For me, being conservative means sticking to traditions, traditional way of life, like traditional marriage, traditional families, and looking at my culture as a heritage, as something to be protected and valued. Being a Christian, for me, I'm a Roman Catholic, so it means that I go to church every Sunday, and on days when I can make it, I try to live my life according to the Bible the best way I can. I mean, everyone's a sinner. We just have to try our best. And being right-wing means, for me, basically that in Hungary, it's a way to define someone who is anti-communist, anti-socialist, and stands for right-wing ideals. So Hungary used to be a communist dictatorship. And we still have politicians today who are either descendants of communist politicians and the communist elite, or have also been members of the former Communist Party in Hungary before we had our democratic transition in 1989.
So tell me a little bit more about the whole communist dictatorship. I'm pretty sure it must have been an awesome time and everyone must have been really equal and happy, like they tell us Chile is, and no poverty or social classes. So please do tell me the marvels of communism.
Communism is when everyone is equally poor and equally miserable. I'm fortunate enough to say that I didn't live under communism. I was born into a free and democratic country, but my parents and my grandparents have told me a lot about how it used to be, how they couldn't express their opinions, how they couldn't go to church, or if they went to church, they would be spied on. And what you have to see that Hungary becoming a communist dictatorship was a consequence of many things that have happened in our history in the 20th century. So just to have your viewers get a basic idea of Hungary and Hungarian people, we had a very turbulent history, and our country was founded in the year 1000. So we are a very old European nation, and it is basically a miracle that we could have survived all these centuries in just a Europe where we are viewed as outsiders because no one speaks our language, and for a lot of time everyone thought of us as barbarians because we used to be, and we used to raid and loot around Europe before we became a Christian nation. And so basically the last 500 years or 600 years we were occupied by the Ottomans, and then we were in a kingdom with the Habsburgs. So we were not really an independent sovereign country until the late 19th century. And then came the 20th century, which was the most horrible time in Hungarian history so far. And after the First World War, since Hungary, was in the same kingdom with the Habsburgs, and basically the First World War erupted because the Crown Prince was murdered. So we were viewed as someone who helped to erupt this war, and we lost with the Trianon Treaty, which was signed in Versailles in Paris. We lost 2/3 of our territory. We used to be 3 times bigger as a country, and just imagine from one day to the other, instead of having 20 million people in your country, you have 7 million. cut off from a lot of infrastructure like railways, and a lot of our mines and forests were taken away too. So basically, the country was devastated, both morally and in economic terms, but we managed to get through that. And then came the Second World War. And after that, the Soviet troops liberated Hungary from the German Nazi troops. So that liberation lasted for almost 5 decades, which meant that the Bolsheviks, actually Hungarian communists who were trained in Moscow, took over the country and began building a communist society by repressing religious freedom, freedom of speech, and freedom of press. So in 1956, there was a revolution on the 23rd of October when Hungarians stood up to the Soviet Union. Unfortunately, in 2 weeks, that revolution was ended by Soviet troops coming in, and after that came repression. A lot of people were taken away to Siberia, to gulags. A lot of people were imprisoned here and tortured, even killed. So we have to live with that kind of heritage. And this is, I think, one of the main reasons why a lot of Hungarians are conservative, because they've seen what communism does to not only the country, but to the person. I mean, I can still sometimes, from the reaction of older people, see what it did to them. When I was at university and I came out as a conservative because I went to a very leftist university, my mother's reaction was immediately, "Oh, you shouldn't say what you think because they're going to kick you out." That's what communism does to you, and it plays with your head. So that's basically how our 20th century looked. And after that, in 1989, we became a free and sovereign nation and country again. And for some time, things went well. I mean, we had a market economy, which meant that a lot of people lost their jobs, but then again, a lot of people who could benefit from capitalism, they became rich. And in 2002, people elected a socialist government with many politicians who were former members of the Communist Party. And for 8 years, they had a reign of terror in a way, because nobody really speaks about this. Nowadays, when you hear Hungary or you hear Viktor Orbán, a lot of people are like, "Oh no, he's a dictator. Hungary is not a free country anymore. It's a dictatorship." And I have to tell you, it's not. In 2006, there was a leaked tape that got out, and the former prime minister, who was prime minister at that time, Ferenc Gyurcsány, who is still in politics today and the leader of the opposition in the parliament, he told the police to crack down on protesters who were protesting against him, because on this leaked footage, he said that he admitted basically that he was lying to the people to win elections that were held earlier that year. So people were shot with rubber bullets, beaten up, and we just couldn't protest. So if anything was a dictatorship, I would say it was Hungary back at that time. But then again, I don't think we should use the term dictatorship so freely like they do nowadays, especially in liberal mainstream media, because it's something that you cannot imagine. So for decades, they have been infiltrating universities, media, other types of educational institutions. So even now in primary schools and high schools, and just basically have their people there that can influence you. Try watching a film on Netflix without running into a character who is in the LGBT community, or someone calling out another person for sexism, or just all these types of things that we relate to cultural Marxism, which of course the left says is a right-wing conspiracy theory, even though there are written works about it. And not Gramsci was the only cultural Marxist. There's a lot of them. And I think one of the top, how to say, achievements that they had was the student revolutions in 1968. So basically that was when they really took over. Those students were taught by cultural Marxists at universities. They internalized those ideas, and now they are the ones who are teaching, who are in business positions, who are politicians, and they try to write off when you say, okay, but we know what you're doing. You're trying to influence society through your institutions and media and Hollywood and universities. They're saying, oh no, we're not doing that. That's just what you guys, made up. It's a conspiracy. But it's very true, and we can see that in the work day by day. Just go on Netflix and try it out. Of course, one of the main tools of spreading cultural Marxism, and one of its children, is identity politics. It's basically taking groups of people and setting them up against each other, like having feminism. Feminism is a part of identity politics, and it's setting women against men. Or you have LGBT, you are setting heterosexuals against homosexuals, or transgenders against cisgenders. And it can go on. It can also be like having young people go against old people. So their way of trying to get people to embrace cultural Marxism and in the end have a Marxist society is to have these small groups, which breaks down the ties between families, for example, because you're like, my family doesn't see the world as I see it. They are not feminists, so I'm going to join a feminist group, and they are more like my tribe. Yeah, they use this word. They are my tribe, and breaking down family ties, or encouraging people to have a single lifestyle is the best for them. It's also the best for globalists, because the best consumer is a single person who doesn't have a family to look after. They are the most easily manipulated. Of course, you become also easily manipulated if you don't have strong roots and family ties. But another thing is nation states. So Marxists don't want nation states. They want a whole world ruled by the so-called proletariat. So they have to cut the ties between you and your heritage and your culture. And they're saying, oh, look, you can just have pop culture, you can have Netflix, you can watch it, you can listen to American bands, or, whatever. I'm just throwing a few examples of what I think can be harmful to societies, because this is also about not having borders, because you don't want that. You want global governance, transnational entities telling you what to do, like the United Nations, or for example, in our case, the European Union, which was set out to be an economic union for mutual benefit, mutual economic benefit, and keeping peace. Because I'm not going to bomb down France if, parts for an automobile that I'm building in Hungary are manufactured there. So now it became more like a political union, and instead of dealing with the coronavirus and getting as many vaccines as it can, the European Union is mostly talking about gender equality and setting out strategies for LGBT communities, and basically trying to shove that down the throat of member states, many of which, like Hungary and Poland and Visegrad countries, are we don't want that kind of cultural Marxist policy shoved down our throats. When the current Orbán government came to power in 2010, the country was in a very bad state after the 2008 economic crisis happened. And what they did, they were told by the IMF, you have to raise taxes, you have to get more money to the state. And the Orbán government chose the so-called unorthodox policies, and they lowered taxes. And everyone was like, it's not going to work. That's not how you do it. You can't do that. And they actually could. And they paid off the IMF loans. They paid off the loans that Hungary got from the Commission with the former government. And actually, when you lower taxes, people have more money to spend. And, the economy keeps on moving. Our think tank is called Center for Fundamental Rights, and it was established in 2013. And our basic aim is to preserve national identity, national sovereignty, and Christian democratic traditions. That is what we have set out to do. But, as we deal with mostly legal analysis, but also do political analysis, we cover a huge load of topics. And one of the main things that I like to do is to monitor reactions to the Hungarian government's policies and moves. The latest one that was very interesting, actually today they announced that they are going to make legislation to stop big tech companies from banning people from their
awesome.
sites.
That is the best
I
thing
don't
you
know
can
the
possibly
details,
do
but I'm
about
going to look them up, and maybe in the future we can talk about that. But the latest that the government did was, of course, the parliament did vote on it, but the government proposed the changes to the constitution. And now the constitution says, it also has said before that marriage is between a man and a woman, but now it also states that the mother is a woman and the father is a man. And you would think, why would you have to put such evident things into a constitution? But if you see what's going on in the world, you know that this is just basically a kind of mechanism to save Hungarian culture in a conservative world, because it's not that evident to a lot of people anymore. And I find it very funny that usually the left always refers to science. This is science. You can't say anything else because science says so. A lot of people misuse social sciences and try to engineer societies by using that. One other thing, but I'll have to read this out, that became part of the constitution is, Hungary defends the right of children to identify with their birth gender and ensures their upbringing based on our nation's constitutional identity and values based on our Christian culture. So as you can imagine, the left freaked out, like, this is transphobic, which, of course it's not. But it does set out very clear values. And now, actually, here in Europe, some Baltic countries, Latvia and Lithuania, if I remember correctly, are also considering implementing in their constitution that the mother is a woman and the father is a man. So I think as conservatives, if we stand up for what we believe in, what we see the world to be, what we think is right, and stand for it firmly, and take all of the attacks that we get for it and show the courage that is needed, then others will follow. I would like to stress this: marriage is not a right. Marriage is an institution. What I think that many people don't understand, that it's great to be in love and to have a life partner, but marriage is an institution. And if you can't have children who need to be, we need to know who your parents are so that you have these rights and these rights, then you shouldn't call it marriage. In Hungary, the socialist governments had this, well, it's not gay marriage, but like they can live together. It's a different kind of institution. And they have some rights as married couples do. like inheriting after each other, visiting each other in hospital, counting as close family, but they can't adopt together, for example, because just from a lawyer's standpoint, it wouldn't really, make sense. But many can argue with that, but also it's loaded with ideology. If you think about it, marriage is loaded with ideology from both points of view. But the other viewpoint that we have to consider is the child. I think that LGBT people, gay people, don't have a right to become parents, but children have a right to have a mother and a father. And I don't care, many people won't like me for saying this, but I do believe it. I think when it comes to leftist thinking, you don't have to look for rhyme and reason. There is none. Children who are not even born are being blamed for the world that we live in right now and can actually do something about it. When it comes to animals and children, what I don't get, I don't know if this news got to you. In Germany, they have banned the killing of 6-day-old chickens when they are still in the egg, and when they are born, they can't be killed because science proves that they already feel pain. Do you think they banned abortion in Germany? No, that can still go on. They are not even thinking about a child in the womb feeling pain during abortion, but they are thinking about chickens. Here in some countries in Europe, they already allowed children to have euthanasia. So that is mind-blowing. Every human life at its every stage is unique and valuable, and by telling people to have abortions or to have euthanasia, you are saying that your life doesn't matter, the baby's life doesn't matter. If you get old, you are a burden to the people. You have nothing else to give us because you can't work anymore, and we have to give you pensions, and your family has to look after you, so you just better go and kill yourself. It's very anti-human. I also don't like to put Christianity into everything. That's why I refer to marriage from a legal standpoint. But here I'm not only saying it's anti-Christian, it's anti-human. And I think that can be a perspective for everyone. I think the most important that is you have to stand up for yourself, for what you truly believe in, because I am convinced that we are right about the world. We know how it should work. We know how it is natural. We know which traditions to keep, because conservatism is basically about keeping and growing what is good and throwing out the bad, because it's not about sticking to one thing, because they like to say that conservatives are living in the past. No, we are sticking to what is good. And courage is the most important, because I remember when I came out as conservative, I got a lot of attacks. I lost a lot of friends, and it can be hard, but it makes you stronger. I know it's a very much used term, but it does. So it gets easier, and you can go to bed every night thinking and knowing that you are right and you are fighting for something good.